Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. For some time now, a number of you have been asking me, where is the trailer for Into the Woods? Why is this not on the public's radar? Why is Disney hiding it? Well, yesterday it got on the public's radar in a big way, and not necessarily a positive way, as Stephen Sondheim revealed that significant changes have been made to his original musical, and that it has been Disney-fied, aka made appropriate for all ages, at least as far as Disney is concerned. And I think that's the big point of contention. Did these changes need to be made? Well, what kind of changes are we talking about? Well, to give you some perspective here, this all came about because Stephen Sondheim was talking to a bunch of drama teachers. And they were telling him that they found it difficult sometimes to put on his works, Into the Woods and Sweeney Todd, because of the subject matter. You know, the gruesomeness in Sweeney Todd and a lot of the sexual innuendo and, just downright sexual acts in Into the Woods. And that while kids loved it, some parents, especially in today's politically correct age, weren't too keen on the idea. And Stephen Sondheim shot back, well, it turns out Disney feels the same way. And just like the drama teachers, the whole theater community and all theater fans went, what? So Stephen Sondheim, of course, kept going. He was like, I've opened this door now, Pandora's box. I'm just going to keep going. And of course, as people are pointing out, what's Disney really going to do to Stephen Sondheim? He's a theater legend, and what he's saying is true. But he went on to elaborate the exact changes. And he said that the sexual innuendos in the song between the wolf and Red Riding Hood had been removed, and that Rapunzel, a character in the film who dies, a character in the play who dies, will not die in the film. And then also the prince will not sleep with the baker's wife, to which one drama teacher apparently said, well, what about that song, Any Moment? Is that still going to be in the musical, considering it is reliant on that plot point? And Stephen Sondheim said, I believe that song has been cut. Oh my goodness, there was gasps, there was horror, as I said, not only from those drama teachers, but across the internet and from the theater community, which brings up an interesting question. How important is the theater community to the success of this film? I think very important. And I think Disney would be very unwise indeed to underestimate how important it is to win that group over. Just like every comic book movie needs to win over the comic book fans, that fanboy, core demographic that needs to champion the film and get the mainstream interested. Of course, they can't rely just on that demographic for box office numbers. Look at Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Although those numbers were so low, even the fanboy demographic didn't show up. Although that's a whole different thing about free screenings. They had perhaps too many of them, etc. But anyway, for Into the Woods, I think they also need the theater group to show up. I think that was very instrumental in the success of Les Mis. I will never forget just scores of theater fans, flooding the theater for Les Mis, singing along during the show, talking about it online, being like, OMG, I can't wait to see my favorite musical on screen the way it was meant to be with the talent that has been involved. Hugh Jackman, Anne Hathaway. Even non-theater fans were blown away with Anne Hathaway's rendition of I Dreamed a Dream. And I hope that somebody does that good a job with the song here to maybe kind of pull Into the Woods out of this negative publicity spin. We'll see. But look at the cast. I have a spotlight on the cast coming up, which should come out next week over on BTT Disney, one of my new YouTube channels. But you have Meryl Streep, Johnny Depp. These are some great talent that obviously the theater community was very excited to see in these roles. But are they seeing them in these roles if the roles have been changed to that degree? I don't know. This is a very difficult scenario, and I would even say that if Disney felt the material couldn't be produced as is, why produce it? Why make this movie? They already have a lock on the fairy tale setup, and I think that perhaps maybe they're getting a little too greedy. They have this whole Descendants show over on the Disney Channel about the kids of the fairy tale heroes, and you have, just the other day they had the first photo released of Kristen Chenoweth as Maleficent, and I was like, why would I want to look at this, TV, cable TV, and not like the good cable TV version of Maleficent, when I should be paying attention still to Angelina Jolie's cinematic version of Maleficent? It was a very weird, division of my attention that I didn't quite understand and I felt was, counterproductive for Disney. And so I see the same thing with Into the Woods. If you're not going to have Stephen Sondheim's Cinderella, why have Anna Kendrick compete with Lily James's that's coming out in 2015? And also there's Once Upon a Time. It's too much. It's too much, mining the same well, and I think they're going to have it go dry. So that's my feeling about this Into the Woods situation. I'd be curious to how you guys feel. Is this a game changer? Will you not see Into the Woods now, or will you go anyway because you're just that big of a fan? And do you think that the theater community, the theater fans, are important to a hit like this? Do you think they were instrumental in the success of Les Mis? I think they were, and certainly even getting in all that Oscar attention and that Oscar win for Anne Hathaway. That passion was the engine that drove that entire production all the way to its Oscar gold. And I think Into the Woods needs the same engine, because who's going to champion this film if not for the theater community? All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is, just the other day, one of you asked a question about comic book movies, and if perhaps Marvel and DC would start making films that were targeted towards adult audiences that were more sophisticated, like Watchmen. And I had said, well, look at Captain America the Winter Soldier. Obviously, that was a very sophisticated piece of storytelling. They pulled in a different genre with the political thriller, and as a result, had an older audience, a surprisingly older audience, come in to see that film, and it's obviously doing quite well at the box office. And so I said that, what Marvel and DC are going to do is probably play off of different genres to bring in other audiences that maybe normally wouldn't see a comic book movie. But it turns out that maybe adult comic book movies will come from outside of Marvel and DC, as others in Hollywood seem to be getting into the game. Now, there's a film that's in development. It's actually in casting right now, called Brilliance. And this is the film that Will Smith was going to make, but he dropped out of it. And now that I'm hearing more about Brilliance, I think he probably felt it was too much like Hancock. But he dropped out of that for that NFL concussion film that we talked about recently. So it looks like Jared Leto is going to step in for this film, as I said, called Brilliance, and Legendary Pictures is the studio behind it. Legendary Pictures is very good at understanding what the fanboy audience wants to see. They're obviously the ones who set up the original Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan. They launched Godzilla quite successfully. I say launch. I don't know how well the follow-up, the playthrough game, the through game was on that, but still, I think that it's you cannot argue that Godzilla was not successfully launched. It was successfully launched, and I think they're definitely going to make Godzilla 2. So Legendary, very, very smart company, and so I think that if they're making this, there's a chance it really could give comic book movies a run for their money. So what is Brilliance? Brilliance is like basically the X-Men, and it's called, people there are called Brilliance, and what they are is they're individuals born with extraordinary powers. And in this setup, they use real-world applications. For instance, one is a terrorist. Now, of course, Magneto is supposed to be a terrorist, but I think this is going to try and, be a little more subtle on the power side and have, again, a more real-world application. A terrorist who doesn't wear a cape and a helmet and have a codename Magneto. He just happens to have powers. Now, of course, TV has been piggybacking the comic book phenomenon for some time. For instance, Sci-Fi has their own X-Men ripoff, Alphas. But I think that having a movie done at this level with this kind of talent, with Jared Leto potentially stepping in as the new lead, I guess he's out as Doctor Strange in that casting race, and coming from Legendary Pictures, I think that you have a very strong contender. Just like Chronicle was a very good comic book movie. And then, of course, they took the talent there and brought them into the comic book films, with Dane DeHaan going over The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Josh Trank over to the Fantastic Four reboot and, of course, a Star Wars spin-off now. So I'm very curious. What do you think? Do you think that this will be what finally breaks the comic book renaissance, comic book movie renaissance, where studios are putting out comic book-like movies that have nothing to do with the comic book characters? This is almost like the emergence of Image as a third publisher. And they actually are to the point where they are outshining Marvel and DC on the page. Some really intelligent, brilliant projects are coming out from Image Comics, and they are doing some of the best work right now. They're a really hot property and have even surpassed DC on my reading list. I mostly read Marvel and Image now, which a couple of years ago I never would have believed. I also wouldn't have believed that I would have gone digital, but I have done both. So I think that if, this other talent, free of the restraints of this continuity of, and the expectations of the Marvel and DC universes, can create compelling stories, you could have the movie equivalent of, an Image Comics, which I think is fascinating. If it has the same effect that Image Comics has had in the comic book community on the comic book film community or environment, that would be fascinating to watch indeed. So I'm just curious, would you go? Will you be loyal, though, to Marvel and DC instead and be like, to hell with you, Brilliance, you're just a comic book movie ripoff? Or will you be like, this is the Image of comic book movies, I'm going to check it out? All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story, a number of you also wanted me to talk about this. Steven Spielberg has 2 release dates set from DreamWorks for his upcoming films. Spielberg, great filmmaker, obviously. I'm a big Spielberg fan. I know some of you might think he's overrated. People like different phases of Spielberg. They like some like his more intellectual Lincoln, Schindler's List persona, and some like his E.T. Jurassic Park persona. I like all of them. I just think he's a really talented filmmaker. And while sometimes he misses the mark, when he hits it, he really hits it. He's just phenomenally talented. So he has 2 projects coming up, and they are, what do you know, they are in each camp. He's feeding both fan bases. So the first one is set for October 16th, 2015. And this is that Cold War thriller we've discussed before, where Tom Hanks plays a real-life lawyer back in the 1960s who the CIA sends out to negotiate the release of a downed pilot during the Cold War. So, Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, together again, Catch Me If You Can. Great movie. Of course, DiCaprio was in that as well. It seems like your classic Spielberg. But again, I don't know if this is the best use of Spielberg's time. I loved Lincoln. A lot of people didn't, though. So we'll see. But I think clearly Spielberg isn't just, maybe he's not just, appealing to his 2 different fan bases, but to the 2 different sides of his personality as a director. So this is just something he wants to do. And the script actually this is also very interesting, it's written by the Coen brothers. And you might recall the Coen brothers have also written Unbroken, which Angelina Jolie is directing. But I have no idea why the Coen brothers now think everybody wants to just see them write scripts. The Coen brothers are phenomenal directors with a very distinct signature. And I would like to see them get back behind the camera, not just write for others. I mean, I think that's great that they have, they want to be just involved in movie making, that their egos are obviously checked, but at the same time, I would hate for them just to become screenwriters. And I actually would prefer to see them maybe direct a Cold War thriller about someone who goes and negotiates a release. I think it could be fascinating. And, we've seen so many Cold War spy stories at this point, maybe that would be like the edge that this needs to stand out. But who's not going to see a Spielberg-Tom Hanks movie? That's a pretty potent pair. People have such fond memories of their previous works together. So that's the first film, set for October 16th, 2015. Now on the other side, a number of you are very excited about this. He is adapting Roald Dahl's The Big Friendly Giant, aka the BFG. And that's coming out July 1st, 2016. So Spielberg's pretty busy for a while, and unfortunately Robopocalypse isn't anywhere on this list. And of course he's producing. The man just, you might not know this, but he gets a percentage for life of the at Universal Studios theme parks of all their revenue, because he helped develop it and just put his name on it when they wanted to advertise it at the beginning, being like, Steven Spielberg likes this theme park, you should come too. So talk about a phenomenal deal. So Steven Spielberg is, basically, the Scrooge McDuck of Hollywood. But anyway, Big Friendly Giant, what's also very interesting about this is the script has been written by Melissa Matheson, who wrote E.T. Now, let's not address the fact that Steven Spielberg and Melissa Matheson really stole E.T. from another writer. She's been in court for years. I think this was recently resolved, actually, but she has Spielberg's notes on her script. Really sad story, and, I think a black eye on Spielberg's reputation, especially because I feel so strongly about the rights of the creator, and that credit should go where it's due. And I know a number of you feel the same way. But anyway, nobody really knows about that story, and Steven Spielberg largely remains unscathed. So they're going on to make another movie, but Roald Dahl has to get credit because everybody knows he wrote The Big Friendly Giant. And also another fun fact, Melissa Matheson is Harrison Ford's first wife, just another, good point about how for a while there, Spielberg, Lucas, Harrison Ford, and of course Melissa Matheson were all part of this, group. We talk about Judd Apatow and these kind of comedy frat packs that exist today, but back then there was an action pack, frat/sorority house of talent back then as well. These little communities that pop up. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. On to the viewer question from Star-Lord. Yes, Peter Quill has taken time to ask a question. Now, but great handle. So Star-Lord asks, "Hi Grace, I asked this question 3 or 4 times before. Maybe you will choose it this time." I did! Never give up, guys. I'm sorry, sometimes I don't pick your questions. I've seen a few despondent comments lately about my not picking your question. Please, don't take it personally. Really, I can only pick one a day, and often it has nothing to do with the quality of your question, just, what's timely, what others will find interesting, the most people will find interesting. Again, just like when you're trying to get a job in the entertainment business, there's a lot of rejection, and it's rarely personal. So keep trying, and, look, you might get your question answered after all. So, but what's Star-Lord's question that was so important that he or she asked several times? Well, Star-Lord says, "I'm from Poland. And almost every movie, except the Polish ones, animations, and a few other films, like the Marvel movies, are shown with subtitles in the cinema. Polish people are just used to that. And there is a stereotype that American people, that they are too lazy and dumb, these are Star-Lord's words, to watch movies with subtitles. And that's why Hollywood remakes a lot of foreign films. Is there a grain of truth to this stereotype? Star-Lord wants to know if this is true. Please say it's not true, says Star-Lord. But Star-Lord, not the lazy and dumb part, but it's true. We don't want to use names, but a large swath of the population of moviegoers here don't want to read subtitles. But let me continue. So Star-Lord says, do you think there's another reason why foreign films, with a few exceptions, are not popular in America? Like, for instance, he or she says The Untouchables. It was a monster hit in Europe, but it only made $10 million in the U.S. box office. I love your show and watch it every day. Thanks. You know a lot more about the film industry. Bye. Winky smiley face. I think he said I know. I'm not sure. But Star-Lord, clearly, we both know a lot about the film industry now, and we're learning together. But I love your question, and I think that it's, once again, I'd like to retouch on this because I feel that the market is changing. But anyway, yes, Americans don't really watch foreign films for two reasons. One, don't like subtitles. A lot of American moviegoers don't even like black and white. This is something that's a constant annoyance to film fans even here, because we're like, they play a lot of great movies on Turner Classic Movies, and there's a huge part of the population that goes, I don't care, that's a black and white movie. And we're like, you're missing amazing stuff. So I would say to any of you out there who have problems with black and white films and subtitles, I would really strongly advise you to try and work your way past that, because you're missing some great material. But why is a film like The Untouchables not successful here? Well, for two reasons. One, again, Americans just aren't particularly interested in foreign film, even when it is a phenomenon like The Untouchables, which is unfortunate. But I think hopefully as films become bigger and bigger overseas, and I think they're made to appeal to the American audience, for instance, that's what China's doing right now. They're bringing Hollywood talent to China to make films that appeal to both audiences. You might maybe see American audiences more into this. Also, there's talk of shooting films in English and the Mandarin in the local language, which must be very costly. But let's see if it works. So that's one workaround. So that's one problem. So you have a problem with Americans not interested in the material. The other is that Hollywood studios don't want to advertise these movies. We've discussed this shortly before, and that they're like, why should I advertise The Untouchables when I can remake The Untouchables? I've already made a bunch of money off of The Untouchables overseas, but I can remake The Untouchables with a new cast, an American cast that's stars that are known the world over, and I can re-release it. Now, of course, this didn't work with Delivery Man. That really did not deliver at the box office, and that was a remake of a French-Canadian film. So this doesn't always work out, and I think that as the global box office becomes stronger and moviegoers have more self-confidence and more national pride, they're going to be really against these remakes of their films. And although Let the Right One In, when they remade that film, it didn't work out so well, they're just, there's this kind of like this struggle for who's in charge of movie making in the world. Hollywood for decades has said it's us. If the rest of the world wants to go make cute little movies, go ahead. And then if you're lucky, we'll take your movie and remake it. But hopefully, I think we're approaching a point where that won't be the case. And also, this is where it will really come into play when a movie no longer needs to be successful in the United States to be considered a success. Look at The Untouchables. Even though it was so successful worldwide, it still is a little bit of a stain on its reputation that it couldn't deliver here in the United States. That shouldn't be the case. So we need to get a situation here. But although I would say, look at soccer. Soccer is so popular. Everybody's watching the World Cup right now, and America just doesn't care overall. And this has been going on for decades, that soccer is a phenomenon everywhere but here, and America just simply has not caught on. Although someone the other day told me that's because America just simply isn't good at soccer, but we're good at movie making. So there is a shared interest here. So let's see if maybe a film can go where soccer has not. But you're just to answer your question, Star-Lord, it's true. Foreign films sadly don't get a lot of play here. But maybe also if we get more genre-y films, like for instance The Raid, I think has been one of the most successful crossover films in recent memory, because action is a universal language, and The Raid 2 was so phenomenally well made. But they're remaking The Raid here in America, and we'll see how it does. Not just here, but worldwide. So if you want to see this stop seeing the American remakes of your local films, and that will help Hollywood have to just get behind the other properties. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.